Another greatest calls bracket interview. Very fortunate to be joined by the great voice of Fox Sports, Joe Buck. He's called 20 straight World Series, just called his sixth Super Bowl in February. Joe, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. How are you and the family doing?
We're doing good. It's a weird time, obviously, for everybody, and we're all, those of us in the sports world are trying to figure out what's next and how it's going to all reopen and how we can kind of navigate our way through this. Family-wise, it's great. I've got 2-year-old twin boys, remarried 6 years ago, and my daughters, who are 24 and 21, are back in town in St. Louis. So it's been, the silver linings have been really silver. It's all under the cloud of people fighting this terrible virus and then the fallout that's happened in this country with regard to coronavirus and now with all of the social unrest. It's an interesting year.
Well, Joe, I know you've had a chance to look at the brackets. The Buck family, between you and your dad, Jack, very well represented in our greatest calls bracket. 8 calls combined, and your dad has a couple that have made the Final Four, one on the TV side, one on the radio side. Why don't we dive right into it with the Kirby Puckett call in 1991, Game 6 of the World Series. Why don't we go ahead and play this one first?
The hitter swings at the arm motion. Into deep left center for Mitchell, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
So your dad makes the iconic "we'll see you tomorrow night" call. Just curious about your thoughts on that moment and take us through the call from your vantage point.
Yeah, I could do a seminar on this call and on that time in his career. That was year 2 of what was not a real great time for him physically and even professionally. He was supposed to be the number 2 guy and be paired with Jim Cott for 2 years at CBS. And CBS made the move and fired Brent Musburger, which elevated my dad from the number 2 team to the number 1 team with Tim McCarver. And so we had these 2 years, and it never really was a great fit. And I think my dad at that point, we talked about it, he and I, plenty after that 2-year period in his life. I don't think that he was himself for those 2 years. And when I hear those calls are great. It was kind of the in-between time that I didn't hear my dad's personality and I didn't hear what people fell in love with in St. Louis. Now, he was a guy that grew up being a radio announcer and making the switch to TV where the analyst is really featured, in this case, Tim, was a tough transition for him. He would have been much better off on the number 2 team, I think a lot happier, but that meant that he got to do the World Series and all these big games. And there was a main critic in the USA Today named Rudy Martzke who was just slamming him on every Monday. And it was a tough time for our family because we just wanted the best for, my dad, my mom's husband. It's for him to enjoy it. So it's a long-winded way of saying he was not at his sharpest or most confident. And when I see that call and I hear that call, I love it because it's him. It's his personality, and it's not an easy call. At the Metrodome, they had the padded wall on the bottom, and then they had, I don't know how high it was, but it was a high level of plexiglass above that wall. My dad was in his mid-60s, did not have great eyesight, and it always astonished me that he made that call as quickly as he did because it was easy to miss if that ball actually went over the plexiglass or if it bounced off the plexiglass theoretically and came back onto the field, and he nailed it. He absolutely nailed it. And in one sentence, he captured the moment, and then he let Kirby Puckett go around the bases with no audio other than a crazy crowd at the Metrodome. That's what I love about it. So I think you need to put it in context. And for somebody like you, Jack, that's starting in this business, you think of my dad and Jack Buck in the Hall of Fame and, one of the greats of the all-time greats. And I can tell you that for a guy that was dealing with a lot of things at that time, both public pressure and criticism and then physical health, in one sentence, he nailed the moment. He set up Game 7. He stated what just happened, saying, hey, they've won the game. That means we'll see you tomorrow night back at your TV to watch Game 7 of this great series. And it was even better the next game. On top of that, he stopped talking and let the Metrodome crowd just carry it. So there's a lot to love there. And obviously I do, because I use that same call, basically almost the same rhythm and everything, almost 20 years to the day later in the David Freese Game 6 home run in 2011. So that one's near and dear to my heart.
That was going to be my next point, my next clip to play with you, Joe, the David Freese homer in the 2011 World Series. I know it's reminiscent of it. It's nearly identical.
Freese hits it in the air to center. We will see you tomorrow night.
Just take us through kind of how that moment came about. And that was a wild game as well.
You know, I think you could make the case for a lot of games being the quote unquote best game you've ever seen. It depends on, if you're a Yankee fan, it's going to be a Yankee game probably because of what it means to you emotionally. Or if you're a Colorado Rocky fan, it's some huge home run that meant the world to you that Todd Helton hit back in the day. So a lot of these, that's the best game I've ever seen, are really personal moments more than anything. But I think for a team to be down to their last strike twice and up against elimination, and for a team that had come out of nowhere in the final month of the season to win the wild card to get in, that was, I'm not going to say the best, but I haven't seen any better. I'll tell you that, because of what was on the line. And as Tony La Russa said, when I saw him after that game, I went down into his office and he said, for as great as that moment was, and it was awesome, it'll be just a footnote if the Cardinals don't win Game 7. And then they went on to win Game 7. So the circumstances were kind of the same, a team at home in Game 6, needing to win to force a Game 7. It was 20 years almost to the day, and I threw it out there because it fit, and I think it's something my dad would have been emotional about, probably if he were live, one booth to my left, calling it on Cardinals radio. He probably would have said the same thing because he was the originator of that whole thing. So I was doing the Jack Buck cover band thing, and that's the last time I'll ever say it. I had said variations of it. I said it the year he died in 2002. At the end of Game 6, the Giants and the Angels. I said it in a series you don't love, the Yankees and the Red Sox in the 2004 ALCS when Ortiz hit a home run, and I said, we'll see you later tonight because the game went past midnight, as most Yankee-Red Sox games did in the playoffs.
Ortiz into deep right field. Back is Sheffield. We'll see you later tonight.
And then this game in 2011. So I obviously I had no idea he was going to hit a home run. Tim had talked about what happened 20 years prior earlier in the game, and I think that kind of put that back in my head. And so when that happened and you see the center fielder kind of going back and giving up, then that's when you can kind of go into this is the end of the game moment. What are you going to say? And again, taking my cue from my dad or whatever, I said it, shut up, let him go around the bases and let people at home enjoy it, or throw stuff at the TV if they were watching in Texas. And, he jumped up and threw his helmet between his legs. And it was just, those are the moments that make baseball really a tough sport to beat in a Game 6 or a Game 7.
Joe, a huge part of this bracket is the matchups, and a fun part for me has been looking back on some of the legends of the industry. A lot of guys I was too young to appreciate it, but your dad is up against Vin Scully in the Final Four, and Vin's call of the Kirk Gibson walk-off in Game 1 of the 1988 World Series off Dennis Eckersley. I wanted to play that one for you and then discuss it a little bit.
Sachs waiting on deck, but the game right now is at the plate. High fly ball into right field. She is gone!
So not a bad matchup for our Final Four. Vin Scully up against Jack Buck. Just curious of your thoughts on that call by Vin on TV.
It's great. I think it's great because of what preceded it too. It was a really well done unfolding of the drama. Is Gibson available or is he not? And the stories have been told since that Gibson heard Costas talking about it, saying he's not even in the dugout. And Gibson was in the trainer's room and he started getting pissed and he was like, oh, okay, I'm not available. I'll show them kind of. Now, all that stuff's easy to say after, you hit a game-winning home run. I don't know what's true, what's not true. It's just the camera's constantly panning the dugout to see if Gibson was there, and he wasn't there, and he wasn't there. And then all of a sudden, here he is. And it was just like a dramatic moment. I think the call is really good. I think it becomes great when he has the comment at the end when Gibson gets to the plate saying, in the year of the improbable, the impossible has happened.
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. And now the only question was, could he make it around the base paths unassisted?
That's just a beautiful sentence. Really it could describe a lot of things, but it described that moment. My dad, is doing that call, but he's doing it on radio. So that's the difference in my mind in between television and radio. Television, people are watching it. So you kind of make the definitive statement, what happens. In Vin's case, she is gone and that's it. And then he let him kind of fist pump his way around the bases and limp all the way home. And then he comes in after he's given it some breath and says that line. My dad's doing radio, so obviously people don't have the luxury of seeing it. So now I don't believe what I just saw. And, there's more to it after that because you're doing radio. So you have to carry it.
We have a big 3-2 pitch coming here from Eckersley. Gibson swings and a fly ball to deep right field. This is going to be a home run. Unbelievable. A home run for Gibson. And the Dodgers have won the game 5-4. I don't believe what I just saw. I don't believe what I just saw. One of the most remarkable finishes to any World Series game. A one-handed home run by Kirk Gibson. And the Dodgers have won it 5-4. And I am stunned, Bill. I have seen a lot of dramatic finishes in a lot of sports, but this one might top almost every other one.
They're two great calls. They're of the same moment, but they're on two different mediums, and therefore they're different calls. They sound different. One has more words than the other, and it's tough to pick. It's kind of, what do you like? The pictures matching up and the voice of Vin Scully because it's on TV, or do you like the voice of Jack Buck and him doing it on radio and describing it for people in taxi cabs or whatever? So same moment, two Hall of Famers and two different calls. And by the way, one of those two calls gave me chills. I won't tell you which one, but it wasn't the first one.
I was curious, did you and your dad have discussions when you were starting out and getting into TV about the differences between radio and TV, especially in those big moments?
When I was auditioning at Fox, and I was 24, about to be 25, and I had never done football, and sitting in my dad's living room in spring training, so March of 1994, which is when Fox kind of got up off the ground and came out of nowhere to get the rights to cover the NFC, in essence, just overwhelming the NFL with money to get the rights to cover the NFC. My dad and I sat in his living room and we got a videotape FedEx to us from Channel 4 in St. Louis with an old game. And I think it was an old Saints game, like Bobby Hebert as quarterback and whatever. And it didn't even matter who the names and numbers were, but it was like, how am I going to get used to calling this game on TV when A, I had never done football, and B, I sure as heck, any real knowledge I had was more on radio than television. And I started doing it from the living room going, okay, the running backs are in an I formation, so-and-so is split out wide to the right, and my dad's like, stop. You don't need any of that. This is television. It's not radio. It's different. All you have to say is down and distance and, throw one other thing in there, maybe whatever, Williams in at tailback. That's all you have to say. And you don't need to give all the other verbiage in there and let people enjoy the game. I think it kind of sunk into me then that it's just a completely different thing. And that's why I started on radio, whether it was 2 years in the minor leagues or the first part of my big league career was on radio. And then I went to TV. And I was pretty much all TV from that moment on. And certainly I've been all TV ever since when I went to Fox. And when Mike Shannon was sick a few years ago, I tried to go back and do radio for the Cardinals as a fill-in. I was like, God, this is harder than I remember it, because it's just you're responsible for more. You have to talk about the weather. You have to talk about the sweat on the pitcher's face. You have to talk about how big the lead is at first base. There's no camera showing it. You have to set the defense because there's no high home camera that's showing it. So there's a lot more that goes into it. It's why I think if you can call radio baseball, you can probably call any sport on radio and definitely on TV. So those are the big differences. And I think it's easy to let your insecurity get the better of you and say, well, I got to overtalk here, because if I don't talk, then people are going to think I don't know what to say. And that's not the case. It's like, pick your spots, make it more impactful when you talk. And if you're doing TV, let the people at home enjoy it. And that's how I've always tried to be. I think I accomplish that a lot of the time, not all the time, but that's at least my desire when I go into the booth every time.
Joe, you mentioned conversations you had with your dad early on and calling games on TV, and especially football. And I know you've done 6 Super Bowls now, but there's different moments I can pick. Some of your great calls over the years. I think the one that sticks out for a lot of us is your call, the Minneapolis Miracle, and just how concise it was with the Diggs touchdown. And I think maybe you said 8 words in total. Why don't we play that one real quick, and then we can discuss.
Steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
So as wild a moment as it gets, a 61-yard game-winning touchdown there, the Minneapolis Miracle. That one made it into the Sweet 16 into the bracket. But, Joe, just take me through the call from your perspective a little bit, how that one came about.
Well, you can hear Troy at the end of his comments right before the snap say, work toward the boundary. So that's kind of what I was thinking. That's obviously what he's thinking. I think when Diggs caught it, there were 3 seconds left, somewhere in that neighborhood, and they were in field goal range. First of all, the fact that Diggs was open and made the catch was one thing. And then I think everybody in the world expected him to catch it, spin, and have to go out of bounds and hopefully stop the clock. And now you got time, and you get the walk-off field goal, which does not have the same drama as a walk-off 61-yard touchdown. For him to make the catch, spin around, realize, his mindset was make the catch, get out of bounds. He made the catch, nobody was there, take it in and win the game yourself instead of relying on the field goal kicker. I mean, that was the breathtaking part of it all. Is I think, certainly Troy and I, it was right in front of us. It wasn't on the far side of the field. It was right there in that stadium. And so I'm looking down and he spins around and he goes in. And that's why it was just, you can hear kind of the excitement and the surprise almost in my voice. Like you can hear the excitement and the surprise in my dad's voice calling the Kirk Gibson home run. Gibson could barely get to the plate, and now all of a sudden, this is going to be a home run. Unbelievable. And I use the same word in my game because it is. I mean, those are the things that if they write them in Hollywood, people go, oh, come on, try it again. That's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. Let's make it more realistic. But it does happen sometimes. And when you're lucky enough to be there, you just hope you don't screw it up.
You mentioned using the word unbelievable. One more moment I wanted to play for you is the Ozzie Smith home run from the 1985 NLCS. You mentioned your dad in peak form on radio with the Cardinals. I'd say that moment is right up there for a lot of fans and a lot of us baseball fans even, not even from St. Louis. But I know this one hits home for you especially. Let's play this one real quick.
And a runner at third, nobody out in the first and didn't score. Second and third, one out in the second and didn't score. Smith corks one into right down the line. It may go. Go crazy, folks. Go crazy. It's a home run, and the Cardinals have won the game by the score of 3-2 on a home run by the Wizard. Go crazy.
So we hear the go crazy call there. Take me through that one a little bit.
He talked about it after the fact, that he kind of sat back after the moment ended and everybody's still going crazy. And he turned to the radio engineer, Colin Jarrett, and said, "Why did I say that?" Like he's, he thought it was silly. And he said it twice. Again, I'll go back to what I said about him calling the Puckett home run. This one's even harder because there's concrete that goes above the wall, above the yellow line at Old Busch Stadium. And it hits off the concrete and it comes right back onto the field. And those are the toughest home runs to call because you're not always 100% sure that that ball's gone, and Mike Marshall, I think, is playing right field. It hits the column, comes back on one hop. Marshall gets it, turns, and throws it back into the infield. So if you're at all hesitant, that moment by Marshall can really get you because, he's launching into this home run call. My dad is, and all of a sudden Mike Marshall's playing it off the wall as if he's trying to sell it. This is before replay. He's trying to sell it like, no, that ball hit off the top of the wall, and it was damn close. So there's a lot there. It's as good a call as my dad ever made. It's as sharp a call as my dad ever made. It's as emotional a call as he ever made. And again, that's the difference between doing a team's home radio and doing a national game. Every once in a while, those national moments kind of fall into the category of emotional for the play-by-play guy, but it's rare. If you're there as the eyes and ears of fans, and if you're there as an employee of the club, in this case for my dad, an employee of Anheuser-Busch, kind of loaned out to the team, you have an emotional investment in the Cardinals winning the game, and you can broadcast the game accordingly. So that really points out the difference between doing local package and national package. And more times than not, almost 10 out of 10, if you're doing a local package and that team wins it all and you're the one at the mic doing it on radio, that's your moment. That's your moment to get it all in. Whatever you've ever gone to bed dreaming about, awakened thinking of, this is how I'm going to call my team winning the World Series, or my team winning the Super Bowl, or my team winning the NBA title, or the Stanley Cup. That's when you empty the barrel. And, he did a hell of a job. It was a great call. It was not an easy call, and he made it look really easy.
Joe, as we tie together you and your dad, and I know the two of you are forever linked to this industry, but I mentioned you called your sixth Super Bowl this past February for Fox, Super Bowl 54. The Chiefs end up knocking off the 49ers. And what are the chances that 50 years earlier your dad had called the last time that the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl? I know you've talked about this on a few occasions, but just take me through what that moment is like for you and your family.
It's just cool, you don't want to talk about it too much, especially when you're doing it, because then you feel like you're making it about you and nobody else really cares. But I was alerted to that by Jim Nantz at the end of the AFC Championship game. Sure, he had gone back and said, okay, if the Chiefs make it, when's the last time they were in it? Okay, who called it? Oh, Jack Buck. Oh, who's doing it if they win? Joe Buck. So, he threw that in, which was awesome. I called him right afterward and thanked him for that. It made my mom and my sister tear up. I didn't hear it because I was either doing my game in San Francisco or getting ready to do it. So that was cool. But yeah, I think there are a lot of bookend things between my dad and me. And, whether it's we'll see you tomorrow night or the Chiefs being in the Super Bowl with 50 years in between, whatever it is, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if not for the education I got just trailing around with my dad, being with him in the booth, being with him on team charters, shagging fly balls in the outfield before games, going to every National League city by the time I was 12. I had the luckiest, most privileged childhood of anybody I know, but I at least paid attention. And I have 7 brothers and sisters, and I think of all of them, I really soaked it all in. I got taken to more places, but I also didn't take it for granted, learned as much as I could, and acted appropriately. So my dad kept taking me. And then that allowed me to start at AAA Louisville in '89 when I was 19 at the start of the season, and start with the Cardinals 2 years later.
Joe, I did want to ask you the Final Four. If you combine the TV and radio side, of course, your dad is in there, and you have names like Vince Scully and Howard Cosell and Al Michaels. Just some of the guys you looked up to maybe when you were younger. Are there some legends you've admired over the years and guys who are mentors of yours?
Yeah, every one of them. I mean, Al still to this day, obviously. Vin in some ways still to this day because of the longevity and the ability to do games by himself, which is just unimaginable in his late 80s and seemingly as sharp as ever. My dad, I learned everything from, along with my mom, who doesn't get mentioned a lot, but I certainly learned plenty from her. And then Howard Cosell. I always wonder, in the era of social media, for as much grief as I get, I wonder how a Howard Cosell would get along in 2020. I wonder, with a lot of those guys, Vin certainly is grandfathered in, Al too, but a lot of those guys from yesteryear that are a generation ahead or 2 generations ahead, part of what allowed them to be as entertaining as they were is kind of a carefree attitude. It's really hard these days to be carefree, and sometimes you have to be a little bit more measured. But they're the best of the best, and there aren't other, Ernie Harwell in baseball, Mel Allen in baseball, Red Barber in baseball, Jack Brickhouse. These are names that people your age and younger have no idea about, but they're the ones that really set the stage for people like me. And now I try to set the stage for people like you and the next wave of young guys coming along. And it's an exciting time. It's a great way to make a living. And I think that's what I recognized and latched onto when I was a little kid with my dad. I saw my dad who couldn't wait to go to work every day. He loved it. And I think when you're close to a parent and you see them loving going to work, it's only natural that you want to do that yourself. And that's what I saw, and that's what I wanted to do. And fortunately, that's what I've been able to do.
That's Joe Buck, the great voice of Fox Sports. Joe, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to discuss your calls and your dad's calls that are in the Final Four in a couple of years that went deep in the bracket. Hope you and the family stay safe, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah, Jack, keep on working, man. I'm impressed. You're really doing a cool thing here. I'm happy to be on, and anytime I can help, let me know.